Hi design thinkers, we are going to be getting into this video some advanced tips and tricks with layering our design components and building out a design button. I know a button's simple, but we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty complexity of the design system and layering. So if that interests you, then please sit back, relax, and let's jump into the video. All right, here we are inside of Figma. Our goal today is we're going to use a couple of those elements I was talking about from the theory discussion, those quark elements, the tokens in our design. We're going to build out our button. It's a super easy element that we can build out in our design system, but there is a lot more under the hood that we can look at. So this is an advanced deep dive into understanding layering our components, working with the styling of our components, and understanding how we can create the ultimate component that we can interact with. Let's think about a couple of our core fundamental pieces of our component: the quacks, the tokens, the styling, and the text that's involved as well. We have our colors as well as our fonts that we include in our buttons. So we're going to be looking into that. And then we are going to understand the atom, the core piece of our component. This is going to understand, we're going to go through the states, the modes, the types, the inputs and outputs, and the styling involved in our button. So if that interests you, then let's continue on with the video. We have one of the core parts of our button. This is your primary sequence of the borders of our button. And don't forget, we have potentially different buttons on the screen. So we need to have contrast between our buttons. So we have our primary button, and then we have the border of our primary button and how that changes going down the size of our button. What I have done here is you can pick what you want and how big you want the actual buttons to be. There's plenty of information out there that supports what sizes you should have your button, how your button should respond. I would recommend you look into that. But this is a deep dive into pieces that we have not addressed or seen around the place. Let's look at our buttons in the sense of a sequence of borders. This is one of the quark components. We can break that apart and then create primary border types to secondary border types to tertiary border types and link button border types, and also font, so favicon button border types. They have a combination of the padding that's involved, the size of the icon that fits inside of them, the way that it is colored, the border colors that they're involved, and every one of these actual borders have a sequence of borders that correspond to it. When I say a sequence, that's talking into the other parts of our button. So if we had button types and they were primary, secondary, tertiary, link, and favicon, then we also know that we have different states. And that can be enabled, disabled, hovered, focused, maybe even other states. And knowing that we have these types, knowing that we have these states, we also know that we have size. So we also have your large all the way down to extra small in this particular example. We understand that we have these things. These are us breaking apart our stocks, the data points, the information of our design element. We are exploring it. And now we can start to map it out. And this is how we can build more advanced design components by breaking it apart, mapping out the particular parts and how they work. When we think of modes, and this one is light mode and dark mode, we understand that is a fundamental change between dark mode and light mode. It either changes completely the colored state. So if we were to design, let's say, just a primary button, we would instantly, if we were to add a mode, have to design 2 primary buttons. If we were to design a primary button and we were to have 4 colors and we would add a mode, that's 2 times. So that means that we will need to create 8 alternative states for the large to medium to small to extra small. That's 4 times 2 is 8. When we then look at our states, we can see that's 4 again. And this is where you start to cascade into more variations of elements, and you basically build out hundreds and thousands of different buttons. But because we understand these couple of core pieces, we can layer our components and we can create layered components like layered buttons that can support this. That can allow us this flexibility without us having to create every single button and have to manage them all individually. When we know it, we can take them in account and build to get that in the end. Because we also have other elements involved. Every one of our buttons has a potential of having the 2 icons left and right, and also our label text in the middle. They're elements that are involved in our design. That means that we can switch on and off these 3 different elements, which also create further variations. And then understanding the buttons and the colors and the effects that change in, these are your actual elemental styles. These are the styling and the sub-styling to everything that you have on your button. And this is how you can see massive design button spreadsheets or massive spreadsheets of all types of design elements, because once you create a few variations, you create a lot of variations. Now I have my basic button kit. I'm not going to be remaking this exact button kit one-to-one. But what I will do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to be taking out a couple of my basic buttons right here. And we're just going to break apart and demonstrate how we could create these, turn them into a core actual layered component. And I can demonstrate how that layered component can then propagate up and down the chain based upon the pieces that we have created and made for it. So I will switch that on. I'm going to detach my buttons. My expectation is that you can make some of these elements, and that I am going to just start from a high level and we're going to work our way through it. So if there is elements that you are unsure or confused, please take the moment to have a quick look at kind of one of the buttons and the basic layout. So we have the button, left icon, right icon. I named these to make sure that when I make it as a component, it references these exact names. So make sure you rename your actual labels on your layers. Then I have my text layer, which is labeled here, label. Pretty simple. I had assigned my tokens to these. So I have border colors that are assigned. I have them assigned down here, and they're assigned in different things. They don't overlap. That allows me the ability to change them over time because I can look at those and change them throughout my entire design system. And that is basically it. I've got, of course, like the way that I style my borders here. So these will be my new buttons. I will select all of them. I have a batch create component. I will recreate these as a batch component. So now I have my 4 new buttons, and I will just select all of these. I'm going to give them a new name. I'm going to use the current name, and I'm going to dash just new. You can call them an actual name, but because I already have a button component, I may as well use something like that. These are going to be my actual base ones. So actually, I'll do that one more time. When you add a full stop in the front of these, you are not going to push these up through your design system. These are design components that are in here, but won't be propagated outside of your design file, which is great. I will combine these together. So now I have this new design component. I will give these different sizes. So I'm going to start with being large. I'm going to call this one my medium, and I'm going to make this one my small, and this one can be my extra small. I'm starting with sizes because ultimately in the end, the one thing that I keep consistent throughout my buttons over here is that all of them go through the sizes. So if all of them do it, then all of them need it. So that's a great place to start, because all my buttons have the 3 layers of styling. And yes, they might change. If you look at the way that I have my fabs, they do change, but I can make that different down the chain. Overall, the rest of them remain fairly consistent besides the link button. So here we go. First layered component off to the side. Now, I need to understand that every time I add a actual layered component level, every time I do, if I layer too many components, the way that they propagate the information up the chain starts to break away. I find that usually 2 layers up is fine. Anything more doesn't seem to be as effective. So what I'll do is I'll grab this button out from here, and this is where I'm going to actually have my states. So let's create a frame around this one, and this one will actually change the state of the frame because they're the other part of these. So for example, types, not states. So this will be my button type, and I will create that as a component. Now that is a component, I can actually create other variations of this component. I will turn this into an order layout, so when I add in another one, I can call it a different one. So I will first call this one my primary, and I will move to my next one, secondary, and I will move to this one, tertiary. My primary, secondary, and tertiary, these are my types, and I will select the whole frame. I'll go to here, press the plus. I have nested, so I have the buttons that are nested underneath. Now, as I can see throughout my buttons over here, they all have the left and right icon, yeah, the icons and the favicons change, so you can change those, of course, down the chain. But the rest of them are all consistent. They all have labels and they all have icons on either side, and you can hide and show. Because they all can be here, you can hide and show the left and right. Hey, because we have this base one, maybe I even say base. Because we have that, I can actually just select one of these elements. Because I select one of the elements and I have them named specifically, I could actually press this little other icon. It will auto select all of those for me. I can come up to the top here and I can actually make that say this is the right icon. And there we go. I can have it where you can switch out those elements from the right icon. I can create this and I can actually switch out the icon from my left as well. So I'll create that one. So I've got my left, I got my right, and they're propagated through. I have this text block. They're all, as I said, they all have the text label. I can have button label. And there we go. Button label, there's the button label, call button label. Easy. And because all that's set up, and I have the ability to change these, I can also finalize this asset by saying, just clicking the show. Good thing is I've named it, so it already has that for me. I can select the other one as well. Actually, all right, let's select all of them and let's just make sure all of them have that. Yep, we'll select all of them and we'll make sure that the other side has the right one. Because I selected all this time, it actually, because there's multiple layers, it doesn't recognize that all layers of this multiple layers are called the same thing. So we're going to have to write the name out for this one. Here we go. Easy. They're my different actual changes. As you can notice, the changes take place across here. So there's the outline word version, there's the full version, and there is the filled version, which is like the reverse. Because I have all the elements, I've got the outline color here, I got the fill color here, I have as well the actual colors of the text that's inside the button. I can do all the things. So when you don't have these elements, or you're missing particular elements, then chopping and changing between buttons might become a problem. But when you have each of these points, you can, which is great. That means that I could treat my primary as my primary, but when I come to my secondary, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the base under here, the button underneath. A couple of actually before I even get there, sorry. We will enter the button underneath. I'm going to make sure that my top layers also are just auto layouts as well, with centering and no spacing, and auto layout, centering, no spacing, hugging. Yep. Auto layout, center, no spacing, hugging. It's good. Now I can come to the secondary and I can simply take away the actual back color. We'll take that off. I change that down and there we go. Have the other type. And I did use a 2-color art for the text. I could do the same here. That could be perfectly fine. I can make sure that I'm selecting the top layers. I'm not changing the things underneath. I'm only changing the top layer of the components inside this component. And as you can see that there are two types here. You got the dark white and then you have just the white. And instead, I'm just going to use both the same. I'm going to have both become the actual purple solid. I'm going to pretend that this is going to be my dark mode or my light mode version. So I'm going to have a darker color on the white to make it pop. I'm going to select my final one. I'm going to change the background to this. I'm going to remove the border and I am going to change the, as I said, the whole colored component piece, and I will also change that in here. So now I have my three types buttons, and as I have propagated the base version of the button and I've added the types over the top, now I can just drag this component off. I have primary, I have secondary, and I have the different sizes involved, and I can switch off those layered components. And that now, with just these two layered components, I have access to basically all of these, probably besides my link buttons and my fab buttons, but I have just done every one of those without trying. And that's the power of understanding the fundamental building blocks of your designed elements. Because once you do, you can easily build out these components and give yourself that flexibility to layer them and then have a whole working library. So I hope this video has been some help for you, and if it has, please let me know in the comments section below. But until next time, design thinkers, keep thinking, keep designing amazing things, and I'll see you all in the next video.